Hello, and welcome to The Alt Left.
Welcome back, everyone, to episode 47 of The Alt Left. Now, covered a good one this week, although it hasn't been the most talked about news. Labor is making a comeback, man. The strikes are on, workers are getting organized, and bourgeois excuses aren't holding water. Today we're going to be covering the many strikes happening across the nation in this rekindling of the American labor movement. So, join me. I'm your host, Chris, my arm candy Matthew Jumbo Johnson, and the Right Reverend Dr. K for a celebration in all things worker. So get your marching shoes on, grab a picket sign, and hail Satan. This party's just getting started, right?
Happy to be here, Sugar.
I currently am on strike. We will not be editing this podcast, just so you know.
Oh, then I'm out of here. All right, cue the music. Dun, 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 dun.
No editing, remember?
Oh,
no music.
Right. That's right. Well, that's why I was making my own.
Oh, got it.
We're going a cappella. This is now an Amish cast.
An Amish cast? Why do they have to be Amish?
Because we're not using computer editing. Now, I don't know how it's going to get on their ears, but I'm hoping quantum teleportation will allow it.
Brought to you by the fine people that brought to you Quantum Massage. Try that one.
It's Dr. K's Quantum Massage.
Dr. K's Quantum Massage, plebeian.
Pardon me. Dr. K's Quantum Massage. We are still running that special. You pay full price, and you get the second one for full price.
Matt's too busy eating an ice cream sandwich and coloring with crayons to do the real science that Dr. K and I are doing.
That is also
speculative science.
I'm in full support of Dr. K's Quantum Massage. And what's wrong with enjoying a nice ice cream sandwich?
I'm just a little jelly, to be honest.
No, it was ice cream.
Yeah.
So for anybody who's not in the know, I don't know where you've been living, but there are strikes happening all over the country. Breaking it down for the top ones. So in March, 800 nurses at St. Vincent Hospital in Massachusetts went on strike. In April, 1,100 coal miners in Alabama went on strike. Now, both these groups are still on strike, by the way. In July, Frito-Lay, huge company, factory workers went on strike, and then they were followed in August by their union siblings at Nabisco factories. And then this month, those who work at Kellogg factories have now gone on strike. And the newest one that's really been in the news, which I'm pumped about,
me too.
Last week, 10,000 John Deere workers went on strike. 60,000 film and television workers in the union IATSE went to the very precipice of the most massive strike of all. They came right to the head, and they actually got their demands met because they're a humongous union. And interspersed in these, there have been hundreds of other mini strikes or near strikes, from healthcare workers to factory workers to university workers. But it's going on right now all over the place.
Wait, Chris, are you telling me that workers that stand united actually have all the power, and it's the corporate asshats that really are the slaves?
Unfortunately, not much anymore, actually. I don't know if you guys saw, as of today, a judge issued an order about the strikers. Basically, the John Deere factory asked for a restraining order against the strikers, and they fucking got it. So they got a temporary restraining order, and basically it details the behavior of the strikers. So they are not, let's see here, only 4 picketers at a time near the gates of the plant, and the order also banned the use of chairs and barrel fires and prohibited picketers from harassing or intimidating people entering and leaving the plant. So basically completely pulled the teeth out of all striking, because that's what striking is supposed to be about. It's not just you're not working, you are disrupting the flow of business, and you should be harassing the shit out of the scabs who cross the picket line.
That's all right. The Teamsters are on it, I'm sure.
We'll see, because again, this is a court order. They can't do shit about that.
Oh, no. That's not what I'm saying, is that the Teamsters are continuing to stand up for John Deere. And they won't probably be delivering anything to the plants.
That's assuming the Teamsters are in charge of the trucks that are running deliveries. They might not be. Lots of trucking is not Teamster.
That is true, but a lot of those parts come from out of the country, and all of our ports are Teamsters. So I'm assuming there's going to be a lot of stuff like not happening.
Maybe this John Deere one is going really, it's going really badly for the workers. Actually,
it is, unfortunately.
But also, John Deere made over $1 billion in profit last year alone. They'll have no problem holding out for a year on these strikes.
Part of the issue that we're also seeing is that the farmers are getting together and they're really pushing for the John Deere workers to go back to work because they are coming to the end of their planting season. This is the time when they buy new equipment. This is the time where they start to sow lots of crop for next year. This is when they get their crop loans. This is when they get their insurances. This is an extremely busy time for them, and the government is a big part of that because they guarantee the crops in terms of, like, if you had an entire crop that failed, like the government would actually pay you instead of letting you go under. But they have to get that in the ground by a certain date, and those times are coming up. And so I think we're seeing a lot of that pressure being put from a lot of different places on the John Deere workers. And it's not like the John Deere workers weren't offered anything at all. But I think the real crux of the argument here was that they were actually mostly trying to help not just themselves, but any future workers. They were initially offered 5 to 6% for all the workers, plus 3% raises in 2023 and 2025, premium free healthcare plan. And then also cost of living adjustments and guaranteed retirement bonuses and things like that. But the way that they were going to classify employees changed, and employees hired after November 1st would be only receiving matching contributions to a 401k as opposed to a pension plan like anyone who had been hired previous to that. Their two-tiered system in terms of their workers would continue. And so that's one of their giant things that they're contesting here, is not necessarily their own benefits, but benefits going forward for anyone else. That's also partially why Kellogg started their strike, was because of this change in how they classify employees and the benefits of anyone that is hired going forward. And the change in that structure would greatly change how people got paid. Even though, like, most of the workers at the Kellogg plant are reportedly making like $80,000 to $120,000 a year, but they're having to do that by working 7 days a week, 12-hour shifts, sometimes as long as 18 to 24-hour shifts, because they're last minute being told, I'm sorry, but you can't go home. You have to stay and take this a double shift.
Yep, which is actually legal.
It absolutely is legal, which is
worked
crazy.
In a workplace that did that. I've had, when I was in emergency dispatch, we had to do private sector, by the way. We had to do forced overtime, and I thought that was absolute garbage. And your only way out of it is to quit.
And I mean, they're getting paid decently. Don't get me wrong, but
a single worker making $80,000 a year in a factory is the best in the nation. That's as good as it gets. That's actually very good pay.
Now, the problem is that if they are allowed to reclassify their workers, like 30% of their workforce for Kellogg could be transitioned into a lower bracket, which would reduce their pay by up to $12 an hour, which is crazy.
I think even without that, right? Yes, that is obviously that's what they're going for, but even if the workers were there was nothing coming to their salaries, right? Because again, if they're making $60,000-$80,000 a year, that's very good work for warehouse for industrial work like that. That's good pay. That's good pay for anyone anywhere in the country. Honestly, I make half that. That's great pay. That doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. No,
workers have the right to dictate their work environments. They have the right to dictate and negotiate for pay, and they have the right to maintain their health insurance and standard of living. And so just because, and I know this is not your point, but it's what's being reiterated about their pay is, well, they're making plenty of money. So what are they bitching about? Well, they're bitching about that getting taken away. And again, it doesn't matter. It's kind of like that. It's kind of like the birth control debate, where I always hate it when there's, lots of activists like to come out and be like, well, I use my birth control for this and I use it for that. It's not just about, it's like, it doesn't matter. And I don't like deflecting to that, because using your birth control for anything is your right, and it doesn't matter why. It does not matter if you're using your birth control to not get pregnant, or you're using your birth control for skin complexion, or you're using it for or control your periods. Whatever a woman is, ever a person with a uterus is needing to do with birth control, it does not matter. It shouldn't be up for debate, and I don't like that has to be used to legitimize it. Birth control should be your right as a human being, and it doesn't fucking matter what you do with it. And it's the same thing. Like, because you make a decent living wage means suddenly collective bargaining shouldn't be your right? Bullshit.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to say that.
No, I know you're not.
And I was getting to the point of that in two of these cases, a majority of the reason why they're striking is not because they weren't going to keep good benefits and good pay, but anyone in the future wasn't going to get those same benefits and pay. And that was a huge deal for them. And that makes sense. And those are the people we really should be fighting for, is not just for us today, but we should be fighting for anybody in the future. And I really like that.
Yeah. One of the things I noticed that I really like is I read this article in The Guardian from a guy named Hamilton Nolan about the strikes. And he wrote, Americans aren't used to this. Everyone over the age of 30 is still working through a neoliberal psychological hangover, a deeply rooted resignation in the face of long-running primacy of the shareholder class. That feeling is the product of decades of Democratic politicians who have mostly seen organized labor as a group that is supposed to write them checks, shut up, and be happy they're not actively trying to crush them like the Republicans are. And I really liked that, because clearly the Republicans have been anti-union, anti-worker forever. You know, this has long histories going back because conservatives don't like organized labor. There's a reason why in Europe the liberal parties and the socialist parties are called labor parties. Labor is the common man. Labor is the average Joe. Labor is progressive typically, because conservative means holding power and resources at the top, and that doesn't jive with workers. In this country, it's been a misnomer. The Republicans have somehow gotten their hands and claws into the blue-collar class. Again, I think a lot of that has to do with religiosity.
I think you're absolutely right on that front.
Yeah, the Republicans managed to get rid of all the meat and only have the potatoes. They don't do anything for the working class, but they co-opted the culture. I mean, the Republicans with people who are wage laborers is kind of like someone in a slutty Indian costume for Halloween. Like, it's a complete appropriation of that. They've taken pickup trucks and hard work and overalls, and country music, and Jesus, and every single thing American working class people loved, with the exception of the ability to feed their families or make sure their children don't die.
Mm-hmm.
They've sold them on the idea of we are just one of you guys. All these rich upper class Republicans have basically, like you said, co-opted the culture and used it just to imprint this idea on poor working class people that not only are they one of them, but they have their best interest in heart. And if they just follow them and work hard enough, eventually they're all going to be rich millionaires too.
Absolutely. That's what they're going for is, and there's, how Sarah Palin was constantly talked about Joe's six-pack, and it's this country bumpkin appeal for it. And unfortunately, again, because the religious right is so involved with
Joe
this,
the plumber.
Yes, but she was constantly using the phrase Joe six-pack in her speeches before Joe the plumber ever happened.
Oh. And
that was always kind of the joke, is like, is she just appealing to the alcoholics? And so
the answer was yes.
Yeah, but that's the thing. So again, it's a co-opting of culture. And again, I really think that the religious right has a big hand in this. And unions are as American as apple pie, and the Republicans have taken it away and changed that. They've twisted that message into, they'll use words like entitlement culture. They call things like Social Security entitlement. It's like, you're goddamn right, I'm entitled to it. I've been working since I was 12 years old. I've been paying into Social Security my entire life. Right. I will absolutely be entitled to that, you piece of shit. They're not going to not be entitled to their pensions when those senators leave office. That's for damn sure. So the Republican Party has cracked down on these guys because, again, it's for corporate profit. And the Democratic Party, like we talk all the time, the Democratic Party is just the Republican Party with a coexist bumper sticker slapped on it. I've said that on Twitter. That is just the most apt description I can think of. They serve the same masters, and the Democratic Party has no interest in strong unions either, and they never did. You got to remember, even when the parties swapped, FDR days, the Democrats were the parties of elitists. That charge that the Republicans typically make, that Democratic politicians are elitists, is accurate. It really is. It's the one thing that you can say people like Sarah Palin and stuff were right about Obama. He's a Harvard educated fucking lawyer. He didn't start from there. Like, yes, his roots are working class, but that's where he ended up. And the Democratic Party is nothing but wealthy lawyers, pretty much, with the exception of like the Squad. That's who they are. Now, don't get me wrong, a majority of the Republicans are wealthy lawyers as well.
Yeah, that was going to be my critique. This is like,
but they are the party that says wealth is good. Like that's okay. That fits their narrative. That fits their aesthetic. The Republican Party says money's good. Get your money. Fuck everyone else. Like, so having wealthy lawyers in the Republican Party isn't against them. But the Democrats have found this. They are the party of the elite, but now they had to pretend like they're not, because the Republicans have used that against them. And because the Republicans are so anti-labor, unions have had to default to supporting the Democratic Party, and the Democrats don't really like them. And so, yeah, they've been happy to be like, oh, yeah, we'll take the support of the nurses' unions, I guess, and all of this, but they have no interest in it. And as we can see right now, all this is going on. What's Biden done for labor? What has the Biden-Harris campaign or administration done at all for labor, except for force everyone to go back to work and take away programs that help people?
Sorry, there has been a whole lot of rhetoric of that he is behind the unions.
Well, that's the point I was going to make, is just like the Republicans have sold the working class on this idea that they have their back. Like I mentioned last week, Democrats have sold unions and minorities on this idea that they're the ones that they should back. This is the one case where I think it's the best case of political branding succeeding I've ever seen, is with both these parties. They have sold their bases on the idea that they're the ones to go with, and the other parties are the ones that are fucking them over. And they have all bought it hook, line, and sinker, despite all the evidence to the contrary. That's the thing that gets me. You know, I'm not even sitting here saying that the working class should all be voting Democrat, but they sure as fuck shouldn't be voting conservatives for Republicans. I mean, conservative or Republican, really. Like, no conservative has ever had a working class best interest at heart.
Yeah. No conservative politician is interested in the working class, even though it makes up the majority of their voting base.
Well, one of the things I wanted to mention, too, is that we talked about manipulating the culture. One of the things I think that's also part of the right-wingers is, and it's not that hard to see. We talked about Mother Teresa, right? And she's got that fetish for suffering. That's not just unique to Mother Teresa. I see it all the time on the religious right, is this idea of like Jesus suffered, and so suffering is in some way good. And it translates very easily into this idea, this narrative of all you have to do is work your ass off to the bone. And, you know, by the time you're 80, you might have accumulated enough wealth that, you know, you can only work 30 hours a week instead of, 90. But like that mentality exists everywhere, of course, but mostly on the right. And I don't think it's when you're talking about in terms of the culture, I think when you are so invested in a religion, I think that's part of it. There's all these other, social and cultural things that get wrapped up into it and become almost the same. That's why so many people claim to be Christians, but go against the teachings of Christ. It's not about literal teachings. It's about their own culture and what they've co-opted.
Well, it's because Western Christianity has nothing to do with Christianity. It was very much like the Holy Roman Empire in East Germany. It was not holy, it was not Roman, and it was barely an empire. But it was branding. It worked out really well because they were descended from popes, but it wasn't the same. The Holy Roman Empire of Germany had nothing to do with ancient Rome. It was a completely separate governmental organization. Same thing, is what they call themselves Christians, but American Christians have no interest in anything. You read those four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and tell me how any of that fits the conservative narrative.
Yeah.
Because you can debate whether or not Christ ever existed. You can debate whether or not he was the Son of God. You can debate anything, but you cannot debate what is written in the official text, and you cannot debate the impact it has had on our society. What we have is conservatives worshiping a brown-skinned peacemonger who whipped bankers and was anti-slut-shaming and anti-war and anti-capitalism. And they want to sit here and pretend it was a rich white guy holding an AK on top of a fucking Suburban. And it's not what it is at all. It's a completely opposite mindset. It does not jive with capitalism. But it doesn't matter because it has become its own religion. Especially American, but Western Christianity And when I say Western, I'm talking about American, British, German Protestantism, right?
Yeah,
We're talking about Lutherans and Church of England and Methodists and, the major Protestant Western churches. They've become a white-centric, money-oriented, capitalistic supporting organization. It has nothing to do with the religion, And again, that's fine. It can be its own thing, but then stop calling yourselves true Christians, because you're not. You don't practice that at all. At all.
No.
Judeo-Christianity is pro-abortion, by the way. The Torah specifically states that if the mother's life will be detrimental, abortion is A-okay. Texas says no. Well, then you're not abiding by you can't even say again, there's an argument to be made that no, we should never be basing laws on the Bible, number one. But even then, if you want to do that, you shouldn't have this law. There's no way around it. And so what we really have is the culture of white nationalism, and they just brand it as Christianity. But that's all it is.
I 100% agree.
But back to labor.
Sorry for the aside, but I think it's worth mentioning in the context because it's one of the many tools that politicians use. Religion has always been one of the many tools politicians use to manipulate their base. And it's not just Republicans that do this. I also want to be clear about that before we go on back to labor. Democrats do this all the fucking time. I don't believe for a second most of the presidents we've got are God-fearing Christians. I think at best they're deists, and most likely many of them are atheists. Most educated, well-read people are atheists. And there's a reason for that, because the more you read, especially the fucking Bible, as we discussed, the less you believe in the shit.
I would be willing to believe that many of them are American Christians.
I don't know. I don't buy
Gun toting Jesus in the Escalade?
I don't know. I'm a little more on the side of Matt with this. Because I just don't see it.
And you can't, right or left, it doesn't, right, left, or center, you cannot get elected to public office in this country if you do not believe in a deity. Simple as that.
Oh, very much so. I happen to think that a majority of the, not all of them, but I would say more than half of conservative Republican senators, and probably around that too, Democratic senators too, do believe in shitty American Jesus. I don't believe it's a good faith, but plenty of faiths suck. Scientologists aren't really up to much good. Look at the Mormons. My God, look what the Church of Latter-day Saints is up to. But they believe. They're assholes, but they believe. It's a cult, but they believe. And I do, even if they're not dedicated in their beliefs, let's face it. What is it? Over 80% of the country is still theistic.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Law of averages. I'm sorry. If they were a majority atheists, I actually think we'd have a lot more ethics in the Senate than we do.
Atheism doesn't correlate to being ethical. It just doesn't.
It doesn't. But
now,
I'm saying,
if you're a secular humanist, then yes.
But what I'm saying is we wouldn't see so much religious emphasis on this.
Well, but being Christian also doesn't correlate to being moral either.
What? No way. You're telling me Joel Osteen isn't walking on water out there?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Marjorie Taylor Greene is not a moral human being.
God, no. But I'll bet she's got faith.
She's got something.
I mean, but that, and I agree that is a good background, and background's important because, again, we have to think this is not an anomaly. This isn't just COVID happened and everyone went crazy, right? It's not, because we got here for very specific reasons. There's been a gap in wages and profits. There's been a gap in wages and profits being juxtaposed to cost of living that's been growing since the 80s.
Yeah, and we talked about that
exponentially growth. Yeah, this gap has never stopped growing. Again, this happened after the age of unions died. Reagan gets a lot of credit for killing unions with his air worker strike, but Reagan was the nail in the coffin. It was already on the decline, especially in the auto market. And then, Reagan comes through, kills the air worker strike, and all of a sudden literally orders people back to work or they'll be arrested, which, I mean, literally, that's fucking slavery if you're going to lock people up for not going to their job. But beyond that, that was definitely the kind of final death throw of union power in this country, and it's been gone. And in its absence, that gap has grown. And then on top of that, we already have this gap, and then a global pandemic shows up. And what does it do? It shows the American workers two things. First of all, that what you do is vital, right? Everyone's called essential workers, and if no one works at McDonald's, the terrorists win, right? And, we need people in the fucking gas stations, and that's legit. We need people at hospitals, that's legit. We need people in grocery stores and trucking and trains. Like, there are jobs that really fucking are essential to the fabric of our society. But then what did we do for them? Some people got a buck an hour raise. A lot of people didn't get shit. They got a fucking flyover from Donnie Trump and told how great they are for a few weeks, and then treated like shit. And then their employees basically, doesn't matter who you are, there's a really good chance that the pandemic did nothing but prove to you that your employer doesn't actually give a shit if you live or die.
Mm-hmm. For a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you continue to go to work every day and then they cut your hours. And then they hire somebody else to do the same job for less money.
Mm-hmm.
And then they cut your hours some more. And then you have to get a second job to cover the hours that you aren't getting.
Or you're working full time and they've let people go and they're giving you double the workload and not giving you any more money. So you're constantly burned out.
Exactly. Or the other side of the coin. Exactly. And now we're seeing McDonald's with signs that say $15 an hour starting wage.
I thought that was impossible. I thought that would break the industry.
Right. Actually, I saw one sign, a picture of a sign. It was in front of a McDonald's and it said starting wage $21 an hour.
I saw that too.
Which I was flabbergasted to see that sign. Simply flabbergasted. Because $21 an hour for someone to flip burgers? No. But that's what they deserve.
Yeah.
Are you fucking kidding me?
We
deserve to have employees that want to go and work at McDonald's and make food for $21 an hour.
Absolutely.
You don't get to have this both ways. You don't get to tell people that their job is essential and tell them that they're needed and tell them they're vital to a thriving economy. And then when they ask for money to back that up, tell them, oh no, you're just a burger flipper. Fuck you. You don't get it both ways.
And I hate the idea of you're flipping burgers. Your job is bullshit.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Well, here's the thing. Unskilled labor makes this country move. Like, you know who gets paid the least in a hospital? The janitor. You know who's the most vital for making sure everyone isn't dead from infections in the hospital? The fucking janitor.
Yep.
Let me tell you something. When you go to the hospital, if you have a surgery, if you have any kind of open wound or anything, you better bet your ass you hope the janitor showed up that day.
Yeah.
Because that's the person who saved your life just as much as the surgeon did.
Yeah.
But they're paid nothing. And then we're told they're shit jobs and they're people who don't matter.
They're not shit jobs. Here's the thing, and we call it unskilled labor. But there's skill to it. There's a trading process. There's things you need to learn. There's a whole slew. And even with the progressive modern technology, you have to be computer literate if you want to work at a fast food place now. Not to mention the fact, the shit that you have to put up with. Dealing with the public in any way, shape, or form is one of the worst fucking jobs imaginable. And it's not for the 30 out of 40 people that you're going to get that are nice. It's for the 10 out of the 40 that are fucking awful and treat you like human garbage.
But I don't have a problem with the term unskilled labor, because unskilled labor isn't referring to the labor having no value. It's simply differing whether or not labor needs a certification. And
Correct.
To be fair, you don't need the same certification to be a doctor as you do to cut a lawn. Both are vital, both have dignity, and both deserve a living wage. But
while you're absolutely right, though, people hear that the average person doesn't know that, Chris. So
yes,
that's the reason, though.
That isn't the problem. That people the problem is not the term, because no matter what the term was for the division between certified labor and uncertified labor, it wouldn't matter. Because the point is, the conservatives and the capitalists have made a shameful remark on that. Is that we have taken people who, again, we've talked about this before. At the Industrial Revolution and before, people were all craftsmen. If you needed shoes, you went to the fucking shoe cobbler. If you needed meat, you didn't have a supermarket. You went to the fucking butcher, and then you went to the farmer who had a farmer's market, and you bought things from the people who either grew them, fashioned them, produced them, or procured them from somewhere else and brought them in because they knew what they were doing. You bought everything you did, and you had to better have a skill or a trade.
Mm-hmm.
If you wanted to do anything, everyone did. And then automation happens, factory work happens, cities get dense, and labor is, instead of somebody creating a product, people are divided from the work that they do. They are separated from it. It becomes piecemeal and monotonous. And that was by design, because then anybody can be replaced at any time. If you're trying to make fucking shoes and you got 10 shoe cobblers working for you, cobbling shoes, and if some guy goes, fuck you, I'm out of here, and he gets out of here, well, you're down a shoe cobbler. And that's on you. You now have less production because you pissed off your guy. But if every single person is doing one tiny piecemeal part of the job, you can replace that guy and train him in a day. And that's by design. And then they made us act disrespectful towards that. There was a shame that was brought on unskilled labor because of that, and it was for that same reason, is to make us think that we don't have to pay that person. That person is less deserving. And it's not even an American thing. It's a capitalist thing. The British started that.
Yeah.
We just perfected it. But again, that's how you end up with Jeff Bezos and these Amazon death factories. Well, they're bringing jobs. No, they're bringing misery.
Well, and that's always the line is like, these are job creators. Okay, it doesn't matter if the jobs are slave labor that pay you shit. Okay, 1 million slave labor jobs with shit pay doesn't boost the economy. It just widens that gap, and it keeps widening it. And again, mark our words.
Automation's
this is not
coming.
sustainable. Yeah, this is not sustainable. This is not sustainable unless something changes. The working class are going to continue to get the shaft. And when people are starving and dying and can no longer feed themselves or their families, all the rhetoric in the world isn't going to change anything.
With automation, not only are we something that terrifies me is not only we are going to lose jobs, right? Because we have this misnomer, we're like, oh, we need jobs, job creators, jobs are what we need, economies need jobs. It's like the good jobs are toast, and these jobs we're getting, again, things like Amazon warehouses and Walmarts, are not jobs worth having. And just like Matt said, if everyone is working a shit job with no money, that does not help the economy. Economies, especially large capitalist economies, don't work when when all the money is concentrated at the top. The economy, you cannot profit if no one can buy your product. But what worries me more is when automation comes towards things like the police force. And I know that sounds like sci-fi, but we're not far. The Pentagon's already being able to put sniper rifles on robot dogs. So what happens when the automation gets so good that no workers are needed in any warehouses? And what happens when the use of force now has to transfer from all human to only some human hands? What will people do then to rise up? How will you fix anything? We are skyrocketing at full velocity towards an absolute capitalist hellscape.
Well, we've talked about it before. What the big one that's coming up, and it's coming quicker than anyone wants to address, is drivers. Truck drivers represent millions of jobs in this country alone. And self-driving cars are on the way. They're here now. The technology is currently in existence, working and being implemented. Eventually, there's not going to be a need for drivers, and there's hundreds of thousands to millions of people that are going to be out of a job because their particular skill is no longer going to be needed. It's going to be automated. And we have no way to address that. We're going to see all of them out on the street without a job.
Huge industry.
Yep.
Trucking is a huge industry.
And a huge union, like Kay was talking about the Teamsters.
Yeah.
I actually think that is much further off than a lot of other industries first. As manufacturing becomes more efficient, I think that's where we're going to see our greatest culling of labor is in simple manufacturing. Because,
100%.
Because now we don't just have machines, we have fully automated machines.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think you're right. I think we are going to see manufacturing the first one, but I think things like truck driving and transportation are going to be right behind it. They're the next one after it, and they represent an even bigger portion of the market share.
In terms of numbers of people, no, they don't.
Really?
Trucking is not nearly.
There's still more people in manufacturing than trucking?
Oh, God, yes. Abso-freaking-lutely. Well, I don't have the numbers in front of me.
I'm not saying trucking. I'm saying transportation. So trucking, busing, and like taxis, that kind of thing.
There's still more people in manufacturing.
Fair enough. I actually assumed we'd already called.
There's 3.6 million professional truck drivers in the United States, according to the American Trucking Association.
All right, but how many people are working in manufacturing plants?
Well,
because that number could be higher. I got no skin in this game. I'm not sure. I assumed, but I have nothing to back me up.
Okay, you're right. 12.8
and here it is,
million.
ladies and gentlemen. This is what the Alt Left does. We fact check on the spot.
Yeah, 12.8 million people, and that's a conservative estimate.
Yeah,
and that was based in 2019. Sorry.
So roughly 3 times the amount of people in manufacturing that are in transportation.
Fair enough. And then also think about the people in the service industry, because that's not going to disappear.
I think that the service industry will actually be next.
Yeah, because look what's happening with, how many restaurants are going to where you literally order food from a tablet or from a kiosk? How many, self-checkout? The service industry is already getting cold.
So my local Vons or supermarket, they just installed a Starbucks and 3 lanes of self-checkout stands. Now, I refuse to use these machines. I hate them. All they do is keep people from working, in my opinion. And yes, they are slightly more convenient if you have a small number of things and you want to just check out and leave. I understand that. I still refuse to use them because I want to have the service of having someone check me out, because I want to ensure their job, because that's the way I see that. When I go to an establishment, my girlfriend and we just went and bought a couch for her house, right? And we had a very nice young 20-year-old that helped us pick out a couch and get everything set. I don't want to just go to a tablet or go online and order that thing. I want that attention. But we are moving further and further towards getting rid of those jobs.
Mm-hmm.
They tried to do it in McDonald's. They've tried to do it in Taco Bell. They've tried to do it in other large restaurant chains where they have a kiosk, and then the guy at the counter would say, "You can use the kiosk to order your food." "Oh, we can't take your order here. You have to use the kiosk." And every time I went into those places, I would refuse. I don't want to use that thing. I'm not going to use that thing. You're going to take my order. And they go, "Okay, fine." And I understand that the person that is telling me this is not telling me because they want me to use the kiosk. They're telling me because that's what their boss is telling them that they have to do.
And here's the thing: I don't think what you're doing is wrong. It's not a solution because
it's not a solution. But and you're absolutely right. But at least if I do it, hopefully other people will do it, and they'll still see that people still want that personal interaction for those things.
Well, they don't care. People want personal interaction. All kinds of things. They don't give a shit what you want.
Sorry, as the technology progresses, it's going to become much more convenient for the consumer to do things that way, and it always goes that way. A good example of this is look what happened with gaming. What was it, like 5 years ago? It was just before this new console generation, the last console generation, during like the new Xbox series. One of the big things Microsoft was trying to do was push people away from buying actual physical copies.
Physical games, yeah.
They wanted
physical media.
And there was such a backlash that they had to redo everything. They had to pull back everything they wanted to do. They had to redo everything. And look what's happened now. Digital is dominating the market. It's growing up, because the thing is it's convenient for people. The fact that you don't own, because the fact that you don't own a hard copy anymore doesn't matter to anybody, because it's always there. When's the last time you
bought a CD?
I still buy hard copies, actually, for the very reason that I can still resell them. But even that business is tanking. GameStop isn't going to be around much longer. It's
reselling them doesn't matter. No one cares. You're going to buy them for 10 cents a piece.
When's the last time you bought a Blu-ray or a DVD or any kind of physical media?
Yeah, I have a shelf of DVDs that collect dust because everything's digital. It's either in one of my subscriptions or I just fucking pirate it. But I don't need a physical copy of shit anymore.
No. And the biggest barrier to that used to be physical storage, right? Mm-hmm. So you couldn't put a CD's worth of music on your computer reliably, and then tell you could. And then you could put tens of thousands of them. And then eventually it was, you couldn't put a Blu-ray, and then you couldn't put a this, and then...
And now you don't even have to have the storage. Now you buy access, you buy rights. And so when you go on iTunes or anything, or Spotify or whatever you're using to get music, or Amazon Music, you're purchasing the rights, so that way you don't even have to store it. If your whole house burns down, you can access it again. It's actually a beautiful system. It's great. It's just being used by the worst actors. Because that's the thing is this automation is a good thing. I actually want McDonald's to run on kiosks. That's great. I also want the food to start coming on kiosks. I want all of this to be on it. I would like all possible forms of menial labor that are not rewarding to be mechanized. We don't fucking need it. But the answer is to do things like instill UBI.
Yeah.
We need people to be taken care of because we're moving into a job market and we are there. We're on that cusp right now. This is in the next 20 years. 20 years from now, the job market's going to look very different than it does today. And there's not going to never not be a need for human labor. There's going to be tons of need for human labor. You're still going to need mechanics. You're still going to need doctors. You're still going to need waiters in higher end restaurants are still going to be needed. You're going to need human interaction for lots of stuff. Government employees, like you're going to need humans. It's not going to disappear, but we can take we take the humans out of the equation for manual and menial labor. People don't need to lose hands in machines anymore. It doesn't need to fucking happen. People don't need to burn their skin in a fucking deep fryer making minimum wage for some Karen to spit on them. We don't need that. Fast food workers have one of the worst jobs in the world. Well, worst jobs in the country. I mean, there's people getting their hands cut off in fucking Elon Musk's emerald mines. But in America, the food service industry is one of the worst there is. Talk to anyone who's worked fast food, and they'll tell you what an awful fucking job is. I've worked multiple fast food jobs, and I've worked plenty of retail jobs. All three of us have. They're demeaning, and people treat you like shit. You are paid the least amount of money for a high amount of work and a huge amount of disrespect, and for a job that will replace you in a heartbeat. And we're heading there real soon. And is this going to look like a nation where the government takes care of people's basic needs? Or is this going to become a hellscape where everyone is eating each other? Because look at there was that movie Elysium that came out 5-6 years ago.
That Matt Damon movie.
Mm-hmm. That's a fantastic movie, and that is the future we're heading to: a massive unemployed populace that lives by dog eat dog. A tiny percentage of people who are employed, and an even tinier percentage of people who live above the clouds. That's where we're going, and if nothing changes, that's directly in our very near future. We will all be alive to see that.
Yeah, you're absolutely not wrong.
Well, and when we talk and when I say we need a massive upheaval now, revolution to end capitalism, this is why I advocate for that, because the consequences of not doing it are more dire, in my opinion.
Well, I think a big part of the problem too is we talked about branding, but there's one part of that is politicians and CEOs really have sold workers on this idea that unions are bad. It's like you pay $20 out of your paycheck, and that's awful. That's horrible.
Yeah, they just want to take your money.
Yeah. And
me.
And bad workers will never get fired. Bad workers will never get hired. And you know what? That's true. But you know what also happens? Good workers don't get fired. People that work their ass off don't get fired and don't get let go. And you know what? I've worked with shitty workers before. If dealing with, there's a guy I used to know named Joe. I'm just going to call him Joe. If dealing with 3 Joes means that all the other workers get to keep their job and don't get screwed by corporate asshats making shitty decisions, it's fucking worth it. I don't give a shit.
And here's the thing. It's what's the purpose of the union busting, right? Because I actually worked at Walmart once temporarily as a seasonal job because I had no other choice. It was terrible. But I remember there's orientation videos telling you how terrible union are. It's the same with most retail establishments. Most, like Target does that. Amazon has a huge snitching policy where you get bonuses for ratting out your coworkers and shit if they're trying to talk about unions. And it's like, okay, the idea we're trying to stop you from getting ripped off. It's like, when was the last time a retail employee gave 2 shits about whether or not an employee lost $20 fucking? They don't. If your employer is going out of their way to stop unions, that's because they're scared, and they should be scared. And that means it benefits you. Anything your employer is terrified about and is clamping down on is something that is to your benefit at their loss. End of story. Every time.
And if you were in a union, the 3 to 5% raise that you would probably receive during your first bargaining would easily pay for any charge that the union charged you to actually bargain on your behalf.
And your union is going to bargain for you to have terrific benefits. They're going to bargain for you to make sure that you're getting paid better. And on top of that, they're also going to bargain against abuses. They're going to make sure you're not getting ripped off by your employees. They're going to fight for you when you're sexually harassed or assaulted at work. They're going to fight for you when your paycheck comes up short. They're going to fight for you when you're fired for retaliation reasons. Like, unions are there to make sure that's all they are. They are just don't get fucked over insurance. And it's worth every penny.
And when you do have bad employees that are legitimately shitty employees, that doesn't mean that they can't be fired.
No, not at all.
It just means that they have to have really good, solid reasons to fire these people.
Yeah.
And if a management team is doing their job properly, finding and getting those kinds of evidences on those kinds of people is not that difficult.
Yep,
because those people don't make it that difficult.
But it's to stop you from firing your secretary because they didn't put out, or fire that guy over there because he's got too much melanin in his skin.
Yeah.
Well, or that you had to go because you had to go and help your mom, or because you had to take your grandma to the doctor, or 1,000 other things.
Or because you reported your supervisor for doing something.
Yeah.
This is what they save you from.
Like, they save you from all of the real heartache that is associated with being an employee.
Yeah.
That's what it saves you from.
And remember, you guys remember how all of you with kids woke up and your kids didn't have to fucking go to work in a sweatshop? Fucking unions. Remember how you woke up and you had a 40-hour work week? Fucking unions. Remember how we have weekends? Unions. Remember how we have an 8-hour work day? Most people. Unions. Unemployment benefits? Unions. Workers' compensation laws? Unions. Employer-based health coverage? Unions. Family and medical leave acts? Unions. All of this stuff came because of unions. It wasn't because corporations decided, hey, we can be really competitive if we offer things that other corporations. No, they're in this together. When one of them can be shitty, all of them will be shitty. Period. End of story. The reason that workers have it as good as they do right now is because unions fought and fought and fought. And now we're losing ground every single day because we've let that slide. We bought into this idea as a country that uniting as workers to go against people that don't have it in your best interest is somehow a bad thing.
Well, and some might say, like, well, okay, so we're going to support you, but support is great. We need more than just support of unions. And here's where I'm going to go into the what can we do about it? Because unions make up about 12% of the American workforce. Supporting 12% doesn't make actual changes. It's not nearly enough. So yeah, union, they're always good. If you see strikers and you give them water, give them food, anything you can do to help people who are striking, you always should. But what we really need is for you to unionize your workplace. And it's hard work to complete it, but it's actually easy to start. It just takes getting some coworkers together who are fed up with the same shit you are and pick up a phone to a local union, whatever industry you're in. Pick up a phone and call the local union, because union leaders will not just be willing, but they'll be overjoyed to give you great advice and walk you through the process of getting your coworkers organized. And when the boss comes for you, they'll step in and hold a vote. Boom. If you did your part and people are tired of the status quo, you'll have created a unionized job and you're done and they're out. It's that simple. Call your union. Find out what local unions are around you. Assuming you're not in a shithole state like North Carolina or a couple of other ones that are fucking right to work states where collective bargaining is actually outlawed. But if you're not in one of those minority of states, unionize your workplace. Get your coworkers together. Start talking about this stuff, because a union only serves you. Start talking to local unions about how to join them, because that's what happens. You don't just, like, well, there's only 12 employees at this small company, we can't form our own unions. No, it's not about that. You join up with a bigger union, because all you're doing is getting the big guns on your side. Because that big, giant fucking union who you think doesn't care about you very much cares about you. It's your boss that doesn't care about you. If you're getting treated like shit at work, start talking to your coworkers about unionizing. Start talking about things like walkouts, calling in sick outs. Let me tell you something. People think, well, it's a small company. The smaller the company, the easier it is to do this. Mm-hmm. Unionizing Amazon is really fucking hard. Unionizing your local restaurant? Oh man, that's super fucking easy. Get 10 people to call out sick on the same fucking day. Watch that boss shit himself. That is how you do it. And again, there's a million ways to do this, and I'm not going to tell you how to do them all because I don't know them all. I'm not a fucking lawyer or a union rep. Call your local union rep. This is how you can do it. This is how we can fix things. If we can start getting labor organized, maybe we can prevent the festering shithole that we are skyrocketing towards right now.
Yeah. I mean, and unions in general too. Like I'm part of SEIU, which is Service Employees International Union, and they represent everyone across healthcare, and retail, and food workers, things like that. They represent all kinds of different workers from all walks of life. It's a very generalized union, but they're one of the biggest out there, and they have a lot of weight. They have teams of lawyers ready to represent you. All you have to do is just like Chris said.
All you got to do is call them. All you got to do is talk to them. They'll be happy to pass you to whoever will best serve your needs.
So, speaking of serving my needs,
Matt, what's in the sack today?
Do some labor. Open up that mailbag.
Shit, I didn't have. That's what I forgot to do. Sorry, Kay, you're gonna have to edit this part out. My apologies.
No, he's on strike.
I told you I'm on fucking strike. Not happening.
And I support Kay's strike.
Okay, so first things first.
You would too if you weren't such an oppressor.
So the poll, we put the poll out there. Like you said, I actually reposted the one with the asking why they chose their candidates. We got a lot more responses. Still, the number one option that was chosen is that the closest to what they believe, which honestly, good on you if you voted for that. Even if I don't like the candidates you're voting for, if you're voting your conscience, good.
Yeah,
that's the way you should be voting.
Do your thing.
But then the really sad ones were tied for to stop the other side, and I don't know. And that breaks my heart. That really does.
That's exactly what I expected.
I told you.
Yeah.
I told you that was going to be one.
Yep.
Yeah.
I voted against this person, not for the other.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, as much as I don't like Joe Biden, if you think Joe Biden's actually great, if you looked at that guy and you were like, nope, that's the answer. That guy's fucking awesome, and I like him. I am never going to shame you for that vote. You voted your conscience, and you did what you wanted, right? That's great. What I'm sad at is people are like, well, I don't really like him, but I just didn't want Trump to be president. It's like, that is, and again, I don't even blame the voter. That is what the Democratic and Republican parties have given us, and it's just terrifying, and it's sad. And we already covered this 2 weeks ago, but yeah, that poll turned out about as much as I expected. Same as Kay.
I'll add on to what you're saying. If you're going to say that Joe Biden is your guy and you actually 100% back him, I'm probably going to have a few follow-up questions for you. Like,
I'm going to disagree, but I'm not going to fault you for voting that way.
Yeah.
I'm going to completely support you voting who you think is best.
Exactly.
And so in the vein of polls, what I'm probably going to be releasing this week is asking people to share with us their some of their horror stories from where they worked. I'm sure we're going to get some good ones on this, and I really am curious to, hear different people's feedback on some of the worst places they've worked. And I thought because we're doing an episode on this, we could actually each mention them because I've got some good ones for from all my food and retail days. What about you guys?
I've got a million. I've worked at some of the biggest shitholes in the world.
So
the worst place I ever worked was LensCrafters, and it really wasn't even that bad.
Worst place I ever worked was Life Alert, and that's secondarily tied. Second place would have to be tied with HealthNet. I'm trying to think of where else I've walked out in disgust. Oh, I once worked for a tool company called Ace Tools, and it was literally just a job of ripping off old people for grinding wheels. So yeah, it was basically a scam.
Honestly, the retail jobs I had weren't all that bad. The worst job I ever fucking had was for this company called Easy Sleep. And it was awful. It was a place that did sleep studies, but it was just like the people I worked with were the absolute worst people on humanity. Just sleazy, shitty people. The company had no fucking direction. Nobody knew what they were supposed to be doing there. They were in and out with supervisors constantly. Every time a new supervisor would come in, they'd want to shake things up, and they'd always be quick to we could easily replace you. That line I got a lot during that company's time. My time with that company, rather. But the best place I ever worked, absolutely hands down best place. You guys probably already know what I'm going to say, but Disneyland. I actually did work at Disneyland for 1 year when I was 19 years old. For me personally, I know there's horror stories from people that have worked there, but I thought it was the best job ever. If I won the lottery and I could convince all my family and friends to move to Anaheim with me, I'd probably go work at Disneyland for the rest of my life.
I guarantee if you had to survive alone on that wage, you wouldn't feel that way.
Yeah.
Well, in this scenario, I'd probably have won the lottery. Like,
That's the thing is, I think, but that thing is that makes it a bad job. Is if it doesn't offer a wage that a person can survive on, it's a bad job.
And you're right.
I'm not discounting your experience. I'm not saying you didn't have a good time there. I'm saying you had the luxury of not having to put food on your table, keep your lights on, and a roof over your head based on that salary. And I think that needs to be taken into account.
Well, actually, I did have to do that things. I was just able to do it. I got paid decently. When I left, I was making $14 an hour, and this was back in 2004. So I was doing all right. And I was 19 years old and I was rooming with 3 other guys in a 3-bedroom spot. So it's not like perfect, but again, I was young and I wasn't really caring about making money because I knew this was just a temporary job. So I had the luxury, like you said, of going in every single day and just appreciating that I was making the most money I'd ever made at that point at a place I was absolutely loving to go into work every day too.
And it may have been a fun job.
Yeah.
And there are those horror stories. I mean, I've heard it referred to as Mauschwitz, to be honest.
Yeah, and I've known multiple Disney employees. And again, it is most Disney employees actually love what they do. Once they're clocked in to clocked out, they typically have a pretty great time. Most Disneyland employees' gripes are about things like unpaid time to get costume on, and about unforgiving employers with sick and leave time, and about horrible
they
pay.
Have to park off site and then
who cares about
their ass into.
They have trams, dude.
The bus. Well, no, but they either have to walk or they have to take the trams. It's gotten much worse because of the parking.
Maybe, but I don't know. I've had to work jobs where I had to get bussed in. Whatever, it's part of the gig. That I think is the least issue of it. I think
but they're still not getting paid for that time either.
That's the issue.
But that's what I'm talking about. Is they gotta park their car and then they gotta get bussed in and they're not getting paid for it.
Yeah. And that's what's bullshit. But that's the kind of crap I think that's because again, you can treat, and that's something that's a misnomer. Is people think that a shitty job is only one that treats you poorly. You can be treated terrific, but if a job is paying you starvation wages, they don't respect you. Yeah. They don't care about you. Yeah. So don't care about them.
Not at all.
Anyhow, give us some of your stories. We'd enjoy reading them. Maybe we'll read some on the air.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we'll probably have to. That'll be great. Also want to know, don't just give us your worst ones. Give us some of your best ones. Tell us why it was good. Like one of the examples I want to give right now and why I think unions work is, so my first job in healthcare was working for the county. My current job in healthcare is back working for the county, the same system. In between that, there was about 12 years there where I worked in the private sector. The private sector is absolute horseshit. I barely had any benefits. Half of them never even offered like a 401k or any kind of retirement package. Most of them paid me like 50% less of what the market average was. Currently, right now, I have been with this place for 2 years. I am making, now again, it's not higher, but I started out making what the market average was. And because I'm in a union, I'm getting a raise every single year. Now I have a cap, but the cap is in the 6 figures. I will eventually be making that much as long as I stick with it. Yeah. I have a retirement account that now, after just 2 years, has something like $80,000 in it. I get full medical and dental. I'm on my wife's plan for health insurance because she's just got a better plan. She works for the city of LA, but they've also got health coverage there, multiple options, multiple HMOs and PPOs. It's amazing. Plus, I also have a 401k and a 403b I can invest in.
Yeah,
it's amazing benefits.
A job will always bring these benefits. I used to work at a job for a transportation company, and they used loopholes because they did do some work at ports of entry that they didn't have to pay anyone any overtime. They worked 6 days a week, did not pay any overtime. It had huge split shifts where we'd have 4.5, 5-hour breaks in between our shifts. It was ridiculous, and I quit. It was awful. It was a terrible, terrible job. And they actually had a vote for unionizing. It barely failed. They finally, I actually know one of the drivers still works there. They finally had they joined the union like 8 months ago. Things immediately improved. Healthcare, overtime pay, working hours, completely switched around. And we were told the whole time, there's no other way to do it. It cannot happen. Brought a union in, it changed overnight because they couldn't have everyone striking. So anytime you hear from an employer that it can't be done, they can't afford it. McDonald's couldn't pay higher minimum wage because they'd go bankrupt. Well, now it's $21 a fucking hour at some places. You can't pay drivers overtime. Unions here, all of a sudden you can. Anytime you hear that, it's bullshit. It's a lie. And if by some reason you are operating a business that cannot function by paying a living wage, it does not deserve to exist. They should go out of business. Shut your doors.
If the only way you can make money is by exploiting your workers, you do not deserve to be in business. You are a bad business.
But regardless of the reasons, whether even if it's not your fault and the market tanked, it doesn't matter. Whatever the reasons, if you cannot pay your people a real living wage, you don't deserve to be in business.
Yeah, agreed.
But don't you worry. The alt-left will always be in business. We'll be here every week, providing you with nuggets of left-leaning politics all the time in your ears, free of charge, and we will always make sure Kay is paid a living wage.
Oh, thank God.
We will let him keep living as long as he keeps editing.
You're going to start paying. You're going to start paying me?
We're breaking the strike, buddy.
Like I said, you're going to start paying me?
Into the edit dungeon where you get the hose.
I'll take the hose.
We love you all. Thank you for being here with us. Join us next week. We will be here as always. And until then, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and remember, the revolution is you. And join a union.